The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the city lights into a blurry mess of color and shadow. For most people, it was just a pain, a reason to rush home. But on this street corner, it was a full-blown crisis. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, was hunched over against the storm. Her thin jacket was soaked, clinging to her, but her arms were wrapped in a fierce protective hug around a small bundle on her chest. A baby. From inside the bundle, a tiny whimper escaped, a sound the storm almost completely swallowed. Just then, a long black sedan cut through the rain and slowed to a stop. The back window hummed down, revealing a world of leather and silence. From the shadows inside, a man's voice, sharp and impatient, sliced through the night. Julian Vance hated the rain. He hated the way it snarled traffic, the way it made the city smell like damp concrete, and the way it delayed his already packed schedule. Tonight, he was late for a charity gala he had no interest in attending, an annual parade of fake compassion he found nauseating. His world, it was all about deals, deadlines, and dividends. He had built it himself, a fortress of wealth and power designed to keep messy human emotions out. In the world of high finance, they called him the Ice King, a man hardened by betrayal and driven by success. To him, emotions were liabilities, messy variables in an otherwise perfect equation. As his driver navigated the slick streets, Julian glanced impatiently out the window. And then he saw them, the woman and her child. His first reaction was just irritation, a problem, a stain on his otherwise orderly world. He'd seen homeless people before, of course. He'd stepped over them, ignored them, and filed them away as someone else's problem. His first instinct was to say, drive on, to just leave them in the storm. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way she shielded the baby, her body a fragile but determined wall against the rain. Maybe it was the flicker of the street lamp that lit up the raw desperation on her face, a look that went beyond pity and struck something deeper inside him. He prided himself on his detachment, yet for a reason he couldn't explain, he couldn't look away. He didn't just see a person in need, he saw a reflection of a fight for survival against impossible odds. Then another faint cry from the baby reached his car, a thin, desperate sound that pierced the insulated silence and, to his own shock, the icy armor around his heart. He leaned forward, his own voice surprising him. "Stop the car," he ordered. His chauffeur glanced back, confused. "Sir?" He gestured impatiently toward the drenched figures. "Stop the car," he repeated, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. He wasn't a man who acted on impulse, especially not one like this. Yet, as the window rolled down, he knew he was about to step out of his world and into the storm. Cool, damp air filled the car. The woman flinched as the window went down, her wide, weary eyes squinting at the sudden closeness of so much wealth. She clutched her baby tighter, her body language defensive, as if she was ready to be yelled at or told to move along. "You need to get out of the rain," Julian said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same blunt force he used in boardrooms. His tone wasn't kind. It was efficient, almost annoyed. The young woman, Elena, just stared. Her mind was foggy with cold and exhaustion, and she struggled to process what was happening. A man in a car that cost more than she'd ever seen was talking to her? She braced herself. "We're fine," she managed to say, her voice trembling with a mix of pride and fear. "We're just waiting." Julian's patience, which already thin, was starting to fray. He wasn't used to being told no. Waiting for what? Pneumonia? He shot back, his words sharper than he meant them to be. He saw her flinch and felt a flicker of something uncomfortable. Was it regret? He softened his tone just a little. "Look, my name is Julian. That baby needs to be somewhere warm. I can give you a ride. Get you some shelter for the night." He saw it as a simple transaction. He'd solve this problem, and then he could move on with his evening, his conscience a little clearer. Elena hesitated. Every instinct she had screamed at her to say no. The world had taught her that nothing was free, and that kindness from strangers, especially rich ones, usually came with a hidden price she couldn't afford. She looked down at the tiny, still face of her son, Leo. His skin pale, his breathing shallow. The cold was getting to him. Her own pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when her child's life was on the line. With a tiny nod, she gave in. "Okay," she whispered. The chauffeur, surprised but used to Julian's ways, quickly opened the door. Elena slid into the plush leather seat, bringing the damp chill of the storm into the car's sterile warmth. She felt completely out of place. The drive was silent and suffocating, the gap between their two worlds a canyon between them. Julian sat stiffly on his side of the seat, the smell of her rain-soaked clothes clashing with his expensive cologne. He wanted to ask questions, to understand what series of events led a person to a street corner like this, but he didn't know how. "Where were you headed?" he finally asked. Elena kept her eyes on her sleeping child. "A shelter across town." "They have a bed for you?" She paused for just a second too long. "They might?" He heard the real answer in her silence. They weren't just in a storm, they were lost at sea with no harbor in sight. He tapped on the partition. "Change of plans, Robert. We're going home." Julian's penthouse wasn't a home. It was a monument to his success. It was a huge, minimalist space of glass and steel overlooking the city from a godlike height. The furniture was sparse, the art was cold, and there were no photos, no clutter, no signs of a life being lived, only a life being owned. For Elena, walking inside was like stepping onto another planet. "There's a guest suite down the hall," Julian said, his voice echoing. "You can shower, get warm. There's clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but they're clean." He was all business, showing her to a room larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. "I'll have some food sent up for you, and for the baby. What does he need?" Elena, holding her sleeping son, was completely overwhelmed. She had been fighting to survive for so long that this sudden comfort felt like a dream she was scared to wake up from. "Formula," she said softly. "He just needs formula." Julian gave a curt nod and left her alone. Elena gave Leo a warm bath in the enormous tub, wrapped him in a fluffy towel, and laid him in the center of the vast bed, where he immediately fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. For the first time in months, her son was safe and warm. The relief was so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Later, after she had showered and changed into a ridiculously large silk robe, she found a tray of food outside her door, along with cans of baby formula and new bottles. She ate as if she hadn't had a real meal in weeks. Once Leo was fed and sleeping soundly again, she found Julian in the living room, staring out at the rain-washed city. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady. She refused to be a charity case. "You didn't have to do this." Julian turned from the window. He was used to people thanking him, but this was different. There was no agenda, just simple, honest gratitude. He was strangely disarmed. Against his better judgment, he gestured to one of the stark white armchairs. "Sit." He didn't know why he was doing this. He should have just let her rest and arranged for her to go to a proper facility in the morning. But her quiet strength had sparked a curiosity he couldn't ignore. "I don't understand," he began. "How does someone like you end up out there?" Elena looked at him, her gaze direct. She had been asked this before, but in his eyes she saw a genuine, if reluctant, need to understand. So she began to talk. "My husband, Michael, passed away a little over a year ago. It was a car accident. He was a construction worker. One minute he was here, and the next, he was gone." Julian listened, his posture stiff, He was a man who processed information and analyzed risk, not a man who listened to stories of grief. He had built his entire life on the idea that emotion was a weakness. Years ago, a devastating betrayal taught him that trust was for fools and love was a currency with no real value. That's when he decided to encase his heart in ice and focus only on business. He became the Ice King, a title he wore with pride because it meant no one could ever hurt him again. But as Elena spoke, he felt that ice begin to crack. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just stating devastating facts. She spoke of her husband with a quiet, aching loss that felt more real than any performance he had ever seen at a fundraiser. He found himself comparing her profound loss to his own profound loneliness. He was surrounded by people, but was utterly alone. His magnificent penthouse was just a gilded cage. He had everything, and yet he had nothing. Elena, who had nothing, had a strength and a purpose, her child, that he couldn't even begin to understand. He felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest that he slowly realized was empathy. He didn't see a victim, he saw a survivor. He had always seen strength as power and control. Now, sitting across from this young woman, he was starting to see that real strength was something else. It was the ability to keep going when the world tries to break you. His internal struggle was fierce. Part of him wanted to retreat, to put the walls back up and just write a check to make the problem and this uncomfortable feeling go away. That was the Julian Vance way. It was easy and clean. But another part of him, a part he thought had died long ago, was captivated. He needed to hear the rest of the story. For the first time in a very long time, Julian Vance was not in control. He was just listening. After Michael died, Elena continued, her voice gaining strength, everything fell apart. The insurance was a nightmare. His employer fought the claim. I had Leo to take care of, and he was just a few months old. She took a deep breath. I got a job waitressing, working nights, and left Leo with a neighbor. But then he got sick. An ear infection turned into RSV. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. She paused, the memory still raw. I couldn't work. I had to be with him. I lost the job. Julian was silent, his face unreadable, but his mind was reeling. He thought of all the times he'd been annoyed by an employee taking a sick day, never once considering the life and death struggles that might be going on. When I lost the job, I couldn't make rent, Elena said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The eviction notice came a month later. I had no family to turn to. My parents passed away when I was a teenager. Michael's family, they blamed me for the accident. The full, heartbreaking picture began to form in Julian's mind. It wasn't one bad decision or a single piece of bad luck. It was a brutal chain reaction of system failures and personal tragedies. We went to a shelter, she said, but they're always full. Sometimes you get a bed for a night, sometimes you don't. We stayed on a friend's couch for a while, but her landlord found out and she was threatened with eviction too. I couldn't do that to her. For the past month, we've been wherever we can. Shelters, bus stations, sometimes a motel if I can get enough money for the day. This was the tragic secret. It wasn't just that she was homeless. It was the crushing, relentless cycle of it. It was the invisible battle she fought every single day. Tonight, she finally said, looking him right in the eye, the shelter near the bus station was full. There's another one across the city that sometimes has emergency beds. I was waiting for the bus when you stopped. I wasn't begging. I was just trying to get my son to a safe place for the night. She looked down at her hands. He is all I have left of Michael. He is all I have. I will not let him down. I can't. Her story wasn't one of defeat. It was one of astonishing resilience. It was the story of a mother's fierce love in the face of utter despair. She wasn't a figure of pity. She was a warrior. In that moment, Julian's cold, calculated world didn't just crack. It shattered. The Ice King had been dethroned not by a business rival, but by the quiet, heartbreaking story of a woman who had lost everything but the will to fight for her child. Julian didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark of his living room, the glittering city spread out before him, like a kingdom he no longer understood. Elena's story echoed in the silent, empty space. Her quiet dignity had exposed the hollow core of his own life. His success, his wealth, his power, it was all just a shield. He'd built a fortress to protect himself from the world, only to realize he was a prisoner inside it. The next morning, when Elena came out of the guest suite, Julian was waiting. He looked different. The hard, impatient edge was gone, replaced by a quiet seriousness. Leo was awake in her arms, looking around with wide, curious eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I've had breakfast prepared." They ate in a comfortable silence. Elena expected him to hand her an envelope of cash and have his driver take her to a social services office. But Julian had other plans. "I have a proposition for you, Elena, and I want you to listen carefully. This is not charity." He looked at her, emphasizing the words. "This is an opportunity." He had been up all night, not just thinking, but acting. He had made calls. "Before all this, what did you do? What did you study?" Elena was taken aback. "I was in school for graphic design. I had to drop out when I got pregnant, but I was good at it. I loved it." A faint smile touched Julian's lips for the first time. "My company has a large marketing department. They're always looking for fresh talent. I've spoken with the department head. There is a junior design position open. It's entry level, but it pays well. It has full benefits, health insurance for you and for Leo." Elena was speechless. A job, a real job in her field. It was a dream she had given up on long ago. "There's more," he continued. "My company owns several corporate apartments downtown. One of them is empty right now. I want you to live there, rent-free, for 6 months. It will give you time to get on your feet and save money. After that, you can take over the lease if you want." He looked at her, his gaze steady and sincere. "This is not a handout, Elena. It's a hand up. I'm investing in you. I believe you are a person of immense strength and talent who has been dealt a terrible hand. I'm just helping to reshuffle the deck. All I ask is that you work hard and prove me right." Tears streamed down Elena's face, but for once, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of overwhelming, unbelievable hope. For the first time in a very long time, someone didn't see a homeless woman or a charity case. They just saw her. Elena accepted the offer, seeing it as a bridge to a shore she thought she'd never reach again. Her first day at Vance Holdings was terrifying. She felt like an imposter walking through the gleaming lobby, but she held her head high. She wasn't there for a handout. She was there to work. And she worked with the ferocity that stunned her colleagues. She poured all her creativity, pain, and hope into her designs. Her work had an emotional depth that the company's slick corporate marketing had been missing. Soon, she wasn't just an employee, she was an asset. The corporate apartment became a real home. For the first time, Leo had his own room filled with toys. Elena would spend evenings on the floor with him, building with blocks and reading stories, the simple peace, a balm to her soul. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Julian's transformation was just as profound. He started seeing his employees not as cogs in a machine, but as people with their own stories. He started walking the floors, learning names, and actually listening. The Ice King was spying. He still commanded respect, but it was no longer tinged with fear. He found excuses to see Elena and Leo. He'd stop by her desk to review a design, and the critiques would turn into conversations. He started inviting them out, first for lunch, then for a walk in the park. He, who had never known what to do with a child, found himself on his hands and knees, laughing as a giggling Leo tried to climb on his back. These moments filled a void in his life he hadn't even known was there. The laughter of a child and the quiet conversation of a resilient woman was worth more than any merger or acquisition. He was not just helping Alina. She was saving him from the cold, empty prison he had built for himself. If this story of transformation and kindness touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that restores your faith in humanity. Let us know in the comments below what you think about the power of a single act of kindness. 2 years later, the city skyline sparkles outside Elena's office window. She's no longer a junior designer, but a creative director, leading her own team. Her space is bright and filled with life. Leo's drawings are taped to the wall next to award-winning campaign designs. Julian Vance is a changed man. While still a force in the business world, his focus has shifted. The biggest headline he made last year wasn't a hostile takeover, but the launch of the Leo Foundation, a multi-million-dollar charity dedicated to helping homeless single mothers. Inspired by Elena, he was now using his resources to build bridges for others, just as he had for her. The final scene isn't in a boardroom or a penthouse. It's a Saturday afternoon in a park. Julian is pushing Leo on a swing. His face, once a mask of cold indifference, now open and warm. Elena watches them, a serene smile on her face. Their relationship has blossomed into something real and profound. A family, forged not by blood, but by a chance encounter in a storm. As Julian lifts a giggling Leo from the swing, the three of them walk together across the grass. He had offered her shelter from the rain, a simple act on a dark night. He never expected that in doing so, he would be sheltering his own heart, and that her tragic secret, the secret of her unbreakable resilience, would be the key that finally set him free.